All right, today I think rather than going over parts of what I say, chapter 19, I think it is, over the urinary system, we've been classifying these hormones, talking about what they are, what their functions are, and how we would categorize them. And rather than perhaps having all this down on this whiteboard, to me, I just thought it would make more sense. It would allow you to keep up. And and as I'm explaining these, to me, it makes more sense to do it that way. Again, rather than having all this wrote up here, because then to me that would be probably confusing on standing on your side of the desk as well. So we'll just start with, okay, we're talking about the endocrine system. All of these, of course, are hormones. And I think I'm a believer that when you write these down, you're going to have a better chance of placing those into your long-term memory. Because, again, hopefully the next time you see this, perhaps 1 or 2 years down the road, this information will be somewhere in your long-term memory, and hopefully when you talk about some of these functions, then that will you'll be able to remember talking about those in our class. Okay, so how do we break hormones down? Okay, we said the most basic way is between what and what. Okay, and of course we're talking about steroid hormones. They're the steroid type, and then the non-steroid type, okay? And when we look at this, of course, there's more non-steroid hormones than what there are steroids. So this is going to take up probably the majority of of the whiteboard here. So one of the things that we'll probably do when we get back is remember a lot of the mechanisms that we talk about is going to be a first and second messenger mechanism, which means a lot of them have to get their information from the first message, which is probably sent from the pituitary gland. So we'll go through those different types of separating those out when we get back. This is just more so categorizing what it is, whether they're steroid or non-steroid, and some of their various functions. A lot of you have those wrote down, but we're just going to be a little more specific with this. So when we're talking about steroid hormones, this is what we're getting at, okay? Because some of them have various functions, like whether they're mineralocorticoids. Not mineral. Okay. This is a tough part about doing this from here instead of up in the classroom. I don't quite have the same size of whiteboard, but that's not going to help with the spelling, I guess. But anyway, mineralocorticoids. Okay, so that's one classification of these steroids. Okay, another one. Okay, actually there's 2 more. Okay, so we certainly know that this is going to have, it's a steroid hormone that has an effect on minerals in your body. There's only one that we talked about that did that. Okay, we also have these, where they're called gonadotropins. Okay, and then the third one, okay, is going to have an effect on glucose levels. So therefore is a glucocorticoid. Okay, so we want to break the steroid hormones down into these 3 categories. So once we do that, it's going to be able to illustrate, well, what is it that they do? Well, the steroid hormone is going to have an effect on minerals. This one on the male and female gonads. And then this one with glucose levels in your body. So that's why we want to break this down into a little more specific categories. So the only one that we talked about would be, I should erase those or else it's probably going to, I don't want it to be more confusing if it is. That's not our intention. Okay, so as we look at this, okay, we certainly know your steroid hormones, okay, were estrogen, testosterone, okay, aldosterone, and cortisol. There we go. Okay, and one of the things I was able to point out in class is when we look at these, since these in one, for those of you who take organic and biochemistry next year, okay, a lot of these hormones actually fit into the category of ketones, and because of just their chemical nature, but that's for another time and another place. So which one of these four do you think is a mineral corticoid? Because it affects minerals in our body. And if you had said aldosterone, you'd be correct. Okay, so when we talk about aldosterone, okay, now here typically I like to put dashes upon everything that it is that we're talking about, but in this case here is the hormone. Now I'm just going to put a dot here just to illustrate what it is that it actually does. Okay, so we know that it has an effect on minerals. Okay, so what that means then, the mineral it has an effect on, think about that for just a moment. Okay, so if you said affects sodium ions, that would be correct. Okay, so if this has an effect on sodium ions, what that is doing is it's conserving those sodium ions. The reason that that is so important is, what is it that we would say that always follows the sodium? Okay, think about that for just a moment. I don't think we're going to get through all of this, but we're going to do our best to get through as much as we can, and I'm going to keep an eye on the clock. We're already up to 7 minutes. Okay, so aldosterone, if it affects sodium ions, which it does, if it keeps them in the body, the kidneys do that. What is it that follows the sodium? Well, that is for conserving water. Okay, water conservation, any one of those would be fine. Okay, then I'm going to alternate these colors so they hopefully don't blend in with all the different categories that we have. So now we've eliminated the aldosterone, so what is it that would fall under the gonadotropins? In other words, has an effect on the male and female gonads, and of course that would be the top two. Okay, so then if we put estrogen here, okay, then I'm just going to put a little space down here and put testosterone. Okay, so steroid hormones that affect the male and female reproductive system are called gonadotropins. Of course, it affects the reproductive system, that's true, but there's other secondary functions that these hormones do, but that's for another time and another place. So when we talk about this steroid hormone for estrogen then, okay, we want to put down the idea that it affects female sex organs, okay? Okay, and the reason for that is a lot of these just the way the man upstairs designed us, just the idea that our natural biological clock is ticking, and at a certain time this gets turned on, so then these start to get affected, whether it's for men or women. Because one of the things we say in class, this isn't male anatomy and physiology, it's not female, it's human physiology. Okay, so we'd say this affects male sex organs. Okay, and what that means is different parts of the bodies are just going to start to change. It's just a natural process that happens. Again, once these start to elevate, okay, just encoded in our genes, and okay, we start to grow taller. It starts to have an effect on our voice. Different parts of the body changes when we're talking about estrogen. And these also start to deplete as we get older, whether it's men or women. Sometimes men will choose to have a testosterone supplement, and maybe with estrogen starting to deplete, maybe they would want to take on estrogen supplement, but that's for, again, another time and another place. Okay. Then the last steroid hormone that we see is a glucocorticoid, and by default, the only one we have left is cortisol then, okay? And this is what we call the stress hormone, okay? And the reason for that is, okay, because what happens is if our cortisol levels are high, I want you to think about, well, what does that have an effect on? Well, it's already in the name here, glucocorticoid, so it's going to have an effect on glucose levels, okay? So what that means then, okay, this actually lowers, you could say lowers or slows down I'm just going to put GC for glucose metabolism. Man, I'm looking back at here, and I hope that okay, maybe that has to come in and out of focus because I'm walking in and in front of the camera here. Okay, so that is how we want to break down the steroid hormones. They have an effect on different parts of the body and at different times, and have, of course, what you can see, different functions. Okay, so I see we're up to 11 minutes. I'm going to hit the pause button so I can get this erased rather than wasting time for that. All right, now that I got a lot of that erased, hopefully, since this is I think the solvent is an alcohol, so it evaporates pretty quickly, but it also kind of has an effect on the markers when I try to write things down on there. So we've categorized our steroid side. Now we're going to go do our steroid or non-steroid portion. Okay. So then, upon doing that, okay, one of the things we talk about, okay, how do we break the non-steroid side down? Okay, and of course, if you would say some of those are amino acid based, which is correct, and then the other portion is polypeptide based. Okay, so how we would go about doing that is, okay, and we'll maybe make adjustments on here, but again, just like we broke those steroid hormones down, some of these non-steroid types are mineralocorticoids. Okay, so what we mean by this, some of these non-steroid hormones that are mineralocorticoids that are, I'm just going to put a colon, a semicolon here, P and P. Okay, so of course that means polypeptide. If these are polypeptide-based hormones, which they are, what are some of them that would possibly have to deal with minerals? Okay, well, it's one of those negative feedback mechanisms that we talk about, and one of them is PTH, okay, or parathyroid hormone. Okay, so what is it that the parathyroid hormone does? Well, it has an effect on a specific mineral, and think about what mineral that might be. And it's not sodium, and if you thought this, you would be correct. The calcium levels in our blood are certainly, we could say, monitored or controlled by all these hormones that are polypeptide based. In other words, parathyroid hormone. Okay, is this going to raise or lower calcium levels? What does parathyroid hormone do? Okay, and if you said raises calcium ion levels, that would be correct. If you want to put ion after, we'll just say calcium levels. Okay, so if this is a negative feedback mechanism, which it is, okay, some of these you could say are positive feedback mechanisms. They keep going, they're amplifying the change. Some of them are I wouldn't say they're amplified more than others. I think that's a good way of looking at this. But since this is a negative feedback mechanism, you have one that is counteracting a different hormone. And that is certainly the case here. So if this raises calcium ion levels, well, then it has to be a hormone that's going to lower that. And what do you think that would possibly be? It's actually in the name of the hormone. Well, which mineral are we talking about? Of course, it's calcium. So if you would say calcitonin, that would be correct. So if the parathyroid hormone raises the calcium levels, well, in this negative feedback mechanism, then calcitonin will lower calcium levels. Okay, so I see we're up to 15 minutes. What I'm going to do is just put our other categories up here, and if unfortunately we're not in class tomorrow, we'll just do the same thing. We'll pick up right where we had left off. If I can remember that. As we're all getting older, oh geez, I can't remember what we did this morning. Okay, but we will do our best to figure that out. I almost forgot this one. Okay, very important one. That's also a mineralocorticoid. Okay, it's actually ADH. Okay, in other words, this ADH is of course anti-diuretic hormone. Diuretics means whether it's water conservation, whether it's being wasted or being kept in the body. In this case, okay, it has an effect. It actually stimulates something else. Okay, and it's actually one of these. Okay, so if this has something to do with water retention, well then this actually tells the kidneys, once the aldosterone is released, hey, we need to conserve water. Okay, and there could be various reasons. Maybe it's for a blood pressure function. Okay, because depending upon how much water you have in your blood, that can certainly have an effect on your blood pressure. Okay, so in this case, its function is stimulates release of aldosterone. Okay, and this is one of those anterior pituitary, in other words, the adrenal hypophysis of the pituitary gland, okay, is where this ADH originates. Okay, I know I said I was going to break down them even further, but we're up to almost 18 minutes, so other functions that we'll get to, there's actually glucocorticoids that are non-steroids. There's also gonadotropins that are also glucocorticoids. Some of them are amino acid based and some of them are polypeptide based. All right, so like I said, we're up to 18 minutes. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of context on a lot of the hormones that we've been writing down. This was one of them, okay? And then another paper was this one. Will cover a lot of those, okay? Because you probably have a lot of those wrote down. But now we're giving you a little more insight on how we classify them. We've got the functions, but how are they derived? Are they polypeptide based? Are they amino acid based? And if we look at these are cholesterol based because they're derived from cholesterol. Okay, I went a little over on what I usually like to do, so hopefully that, again, that gives you a good context and a good start. All right, we will catch up to you next time.